Countdown or something. Let's start recording. All right, we might be live. I'm going to give it a minute just to make sure. If you're watching us live right now, give us a second so that we can officially start it. Make sure everything's working properly. All right, it's loading for me. Hang on. I see a Hangouts on Air symbol. Okay, we're live. Welcome to Push to Shout, Episode 8, coming at you live from our bedrooms. I'm Skippy Sigmatic.
I'm Brutalcum Powder, Mike.
And we are here to talk about video games and even chat with you guys. I don't really know how we're going to manage the chat or whatever. I don't know if we're going to be interacting with it much until the end. We'll see.
We'll figure it out.
We'll wing it. But for now, I guess we'll just jump straight into it. Talk about what we've been doing for the last week.
So, I just started playing Dragon Age Inquisition, and that has absolutely nothing to do with the crack for it just coming out yesterday. I swear. But De Novo was cracked a while back. It took a little longer for them to get a working crack for Dragon Age Inquisition up. I've been playing a little bit of it. It's better than I was expecting it to be. After Dragon Age 2, I was really expecting some terrible schlock, but it's actually a competent-looking game. There's a lot of weird stuff. Like, cutscenes are locked to 30 frames per second, or maybe even less, it looked like. Like, really, really choppy compared to the rest. But then if characters aren't in one of these scenes where it kind of locks to the camera angles, and if they're just talking, then all their animations play at whatever frame rate your monitor supports. So it was a really weird decision. I'm not sure why they did that.
I don't think it was a decision.
Well, lack of whatever.
Compromise,
It's strange.
I guess.
It's strange because they clearly can. The animations do play at good frame rates for everything else. It's only when they are moving the camera around that it does that. And it's probably just a matter of a lack of effort. And you can really tell that it's a port through and through. Dragon Age Origins, the first one, had really good PC controls. It seemed like it was built for PC first, maybe, or at least they put a lot of care into how it would play on the PC. This is the complete opposite. The controls with keyboard and mouse are absolute ass. Like, you have to hold down right-click to move your camera around, even though it would be totally natural to just kind of do it with the mouse or something. And it just doesn't feel good. But I switched over to a controller, and it's way better that way. So yeah, it's kind of good, but there's a lot of fetch quests, a severe lack of direction. I don't know. It's shaping up to be good. It's good enough that I'll probably buy it. I'm not one to just pirate things just because I don't want to pay for them. I was burned on Dragon Age 2, like basically everybody else who bought that game at full price was. So yeah, I wasn't gonna throw money blindly at BioWare again, but they've earned the purchase. I mean, it's not a bad game so far, but it's definitely, absolutely, no way in hell a game of the year.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's Dragon Age. I'll probably be playing more of that as the week goes on. Been watching more of a show called Welcome to the NHK. I'm about to the end of it now. It's a really tragic story. It's this kid, or not really a kid, but guy who's a shut-in, a NEET, as they say, and he's just basically at the breaking point, just completely cut off from the rest of the world. And then this girl tries to help him out of this, and it tumbles out of control. It goes wrong. It winds up making things worse, and it's this really tragic story. But I'm digging it. I really like it. It's got great atmosphere and a fantastic soundtrack too. I think they got like an American band to do the music for it, and it shows. Like, it's a really good soundtrack. So yeah, that's been good. I'll probably polish that off too. And then we'll talk more about this, I guess, in the news. But I've been playing Dark Souls 1 again today because just today the Steamworks update for Dark Souls 1 came out. And so now you don't ever have to touch games for Windows Live ever again. It's time to
Yay!
celebrate. But I actually, for a while, I couldn't get online to work. Like that's the one thing it was meant to fix. But for like several hours, it would not find any matches or wouldn't find any other players' signs on the ground or anything.
I
But
also I heard it was region locked.
it is. But I've read that that has something to do with the default way Steamworks works. That by default Steamworks region locks everything, and then you have to like explicitly turn it off. So that's probably it. I mean, the
Yeah.
original wasn't region locked, so it would be really strange for them to go back and make it region locked. I'm pretty sure it's just an oversight. But in case you're listening and you want to know how to make that transition, you gotta launch the game, log into Games for Windows Live. That'll automatically transition all your stuff. Log back out and enable the beta for Dark Souls, and then you're good to go. So yeah, this is gonna be Dark Souls and Dragon Age this week probably, and I guess also in more real life stuff, finals week. But thankfully, because I'm like one of my majors is a writing major, so most of that stuff is just revisions of portfolio assignments that I've been working on over time. So it's not like a big crunch at the end. And I've gotten most of my tough stuff out of the way. A calculus exam, that's the biggie. That's done. So I've just got like days of absolutely nothing to do. So may as well fill them with some mind-rotting video games.
I love that finals week for you is like, oh, I've got nothing to do now.
Yeah, it really is. Like everybody else is stressing out around me, and I just can't relate, but I can empathize. Anyway, that's my week.
All right. Well, I will pull up my thing here to remind myself what I've done this week. I got through a lot more of Peace Walker. I actually just sat down and played it for several hours, and I'm really enjoying it. It's interesting. I still don't really know how I feel about managing the mother base, the outer heaven. There's things I like about it and things I don't like about it, which is probably the most popular opinion. I like getting back from a mission and like going through, okay, here's the people you recruited and assigning them or whatever, even though assigning them is basically just like there's even an auto-assign button because assigning them is just like, okay, their highest bar is in medical, so I'm going to assign them to medical. But it's still, there's something satisfying about recruiting people and assigning them to positions and like getting your new weapons by actually researching them instead of it just saying new weapon unlocked or something like that. I don't know. It's fun. I need to finish it before Thursday because I plan on streaming Ground Zeroes on Thursday when it comes out and having fun with that. And I want to complete Peace Walker before I get to it, so I'm gonna have to crunch. I'll probably start playing more of it tonight actually.
I didn't play Peace Walker before Ground Zeroes, and I was fine. They like summarize
Yeah.
all of Peace Walker at the start of Ground Zeroes.
I just want to complete it, you know. I mean, technically it's a sequel to Peace Walker, and just like I know that that's probably mostly irrelevant, even though there's like a couple of characters that return, but still, I don't know. It would be nice to get it out of the way before I start Ground Zeroes. But yeah, having fun with it. Let's see. I mentioned on here that I'm playing more CS:GO because I can't stop playing that fucking game. I've ranked up to Master Guardian 1 now.
All right.
And I've run into more and more hackers, like people who are kind of obviously hacking. Like there was one guy, and he was just sniping people through walls and stuff like that. And it was like, I guess once you get to this kind of rank, it's where people are ranking up their friends or trying to do stuff like that, and you run into these hackers right before they get banned. And at the lower ranks, you're not even playing them because they're already ranked higher than you are or something. But I'm just seeing a lot more of them. But I'm having fun with it. Never stop having fun with CS:GO, even though it pisses me off to no end and makes me angry at people I otherwise like. Sopranos. Night before last, I convinced my family to watch The Sopranos, the pilot episode of The Sopranos, because it's a really good show, and I know they'll like it, and I know
Have
that
you ever
anyone
seen
will
it?
like it. Yeah. I finished watching it, I would say 6 months ago, maybe a little less than that. it's one of my favorite things ever. It's fantastic in every way, pretty much. I love that show. Um,
I gotta put that on my list. I haven't seen that yet.
it's fantastic. I don't know. There's not much to say about it really. It's just really really great. And I think my family's gonna really like it too. Let's see. I over the weekend, the Arma group I play with, Arma Feeling, we played a battle royale mod for Arma 3. And if you're not aware of what battle royale is, it's kind of an interesting. It's not a unique concept, but it is the first time I've seen it done in a video game. It's basically just it's battle royale or Hunger Games where you get dropped into an area with a bunch of other players and you have to like find weapons and try to kill each other. And the way it keeps the action packed is by slowly constricting the area. So like every 5 minutes, the area will constrict to a smaller circle, and everyone has to be inside the circle to survive. So by the end, like you're all in a little area, and most people are dead. It's neat. You spend most of it dead. Like if you're trying to play with friends, which is what we were doing, if you die at the beginning, you're just going to have to wait until everyone's done. Which, luckily, we were playing like almost like a deathmatch version of it, where it was in a really small area. But normally, like the normal battle royale servers that you find publicly are in this island that's like 3 miles long. So it can take a really long time to get through a game. But if you die, you can just go to another server, so it's not a big deal. But yeah, it was fun. I just thought I'd mentioned it because it's a neat mod. If you have Arma 3, you should check it out. Just search for battle royale. I think you have to download it first, but join a battle royale server and just it's fun. It's what I like about Arma, which is that it lets you do interesting ideas like that. I played some iRacing. My dad actually, the only game my dad plays is iRacing, which is it's definitely the most hardcore driving simulator there is, basically. It's a subscription service, and you have to like buy the tracks and buy the cars and stuff. I hate their pricing model, but at the same time, it kind of makes sense because you're buying like a really premium product. It's the best simulation there is. My dad's got the seat and the wheels and the pedals have like force feedback and everything. I mean, like really nice setup. And I don't know if I've actually mentioned it here or even to you, but I race cars occasionally. And it's off season right now, but it's about to be in the springtime. I'm going to be racing again probably, so it's actually really useful to practice using the simulator. It's not 1-to-1. It's not the same at all as driving a real car, but it's really good for learning the tracks. But it's also just good for generally building your car control, because the fact that you can't feel the car like slipping out from under you means that you have to learn how to react to something happening before it actually happens. It's interesting. I don't recommend that anyone play iRacing.
Before we move on to the next item, I forgot to mention this during my week, but it's a pretty big deal, and it's on the topic of racing games. It's a game called Distance. Have you heard of that?
Never.
It's really cool. It's the coolest racing game I've ever played, and I really hate racing games generally. It's like a combination of like F-Zero and Tron, and a little bit of Kirby Air Ride too. It's so cool. You go super fast in these ridiculous tracks, and what you do is you kind of hop off the track and rotate your car, and you can stick to walls and ceilings. So you'll be driving along the track, and then a ceiling is above you, and then you pop up and latch yourself onto the ceiling and keep going, and you kind of fly through rings and stuff. It's really awesome.
It does sound neat.
This amazing presentation. It's so cool. I had to mention that game. I probably played like 8 hours of it or so. It's great.
What was it called?
It's really good. Distance. And
right.
they have it DRM free too, so it's really good model. I'm glad to see more people doing DRM free stuff. So they deserve your cash.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds neat. But yeah, iRacing, it's a racing simulator through and through. Like, don't get into iRacing if you're looking for a fun experience, because it's only for like enthusiasts. And I played at the beginning of the week. I played Transistor. I probably got around a third of the way through that game, I would estimate. I really like it. It's really neat. I like it a lot more than Bastion.
I have too.
Yeah, I actually never completed Bastion. Not that I don't like it, but it never grabbed me. But Transistor, I definitely plan on completing. Just the soundtrack alone to that game is good enough to praise it as a whole. Like the soundtrack fits their art style and the atmosphere they're going for so well, and I like everything about it. It's fun to play too. I really like how you're kind of combining abilities. It's not the first game that's ever done something like that, but they do it well, and I don't know.
Have you read
It's
the
fun.
descriptions for them?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, like
That's kinda,
every ability, they're called functions in the game. They're called traces. They're basically the souls of real people, and then their personalities kind of inform what these functions, the digital remnants of their soul, do. It's really cool. It's really awesome.
yeah. It's a neat idea. It's a good way to. It's almost a Dark Souls way. It's way there's way more explanation than Dark Souls, but I would think it's almost like a Dark Souls way of getting your lore across. But it's fun. I recommend it to anyone, honestly. Like it's a great game, and it's a game also that I've been looking up the soundtrack outside of playing the game, which is pretty rare for me.
Darren Korb is the master of video game soundtracks.
Yeah.
But the system with the abilities, it can't be understated how cool it is. Like every ability can either be an active attack, a modifier for an active attack, or a passive ability. And then each combination has different effects too. They really thought it out. It's cool. It's cool stuff.
Yeah, it's a good game. It definitely should have won some awards in the Game Awards. I'm kind of
Oh, it should have.
disappointed that it wasn't even nominated for some that it obviously deserved. But
It
yeah,
should have
that's
easily knocked Dark Souls 2 and Dragon Age off the Game of the
yeah,
Year list.
yeah, definitely. But anyway, I don't know why I haven't heard that much about it. Like Bastion was all over the place when it came out. Like everyone was talking about it, and then Transistor came out, and I think it's the superior game, and nobody's talking about it. I don't know how that happens, but um, anyway, I guess we'll move on to news. I only put one thing on here because I was kind of rushed for time, and also I don't remember much happening because all the news got out of the way last weekend. But the headline, I think this actually happened today, at least this is the first I've seen of it, that the Hatred game, the Kill Innocence Simulator, was pulled from Steam Greenlight, which I wasn't aware that it was a Greenlight game. I guess they didn't. I mean, I guess it makes sense. It was on Steam Greenlight, and Valve pulled it away and said, I think they said based on feedback from the Greenlight community, they removed it, which is it seems not, I don't know, not entirely honest, but at the same time, I can't say that some shit has come to light about the brutal or Hatred. I have to say brutal because of you. The Hatred developers, and it's kind of a lot of rumors and not a lot of facts. But have you heard about this at all?
Is it the rumors that they're like skinheads or?
Yes.
Yeah, it's bullshit.
Yeah, I did a minimal amount of research, but from what I found, actually from a not Kotaku, Polygon. What's the difference though? A Polygon article. Polygon was apparently one of the first to. Well, they wrote a lot about Hatred and its problematic ways, but they actually ran an interview with, or at least they quoted the Hatred developers concerning the rumors that they are neo-Nazis or neo-Nazi supporters or something like that. Apparently, it's all based on a Facebook page that the creator, or one of the creators of the game, liked, which was like a Polish hate group who went around defending women from Muslims. Apparently, I don't know. It sounds really bizarre, but like, yeah, I don't think, like, I'm sure that you could go through what I've liked on Facebook, and first of all, half of them are probably accidental likes, and the other half are just stupid shit that I didn't even think about before I clicked like, and so who fucking knows why people are so quick to jump to conclusions, and accusing someone of being a neo-Nazi is a really, really, really serious accusation, and just feel like that's kind of silly. But at the same time, people were criticizing Valve of censorship, which Valve is a
No.
private company. They can choose who they sell, like who they do their business with and everything. Like if they're completely within their rights to remove that game for any reason from their platform. So shut up. That's Valve's decision.
I guess it's a Total Biscuit said something about some other game that got pulled from somewhere. Oh, it was GTA 5 from Australian targets.
Yeah, that also
And
happened.
I think that you can acknowledge that it's within their right as a private company to not sell anything they don't want to sell, but you can also then criticize the reason that it was pulled. Like um, you don't blame the company trying to achieve their bottom line for pulling it from the shelves. You ban the consumer pressure that, or sorry, you critique the consumer pressure that made them do it in the first place, which I think it's probably a little less clear cut for hatred, because Grand Theft Auto 5, it has a reason to exist. It's clearly a good product, and the violence is tertiary, or at least the violence toward women is tertiary.
And a lot of the complaints that people have about GTA 5 are
Factually wrong.
yeah, like people not realizing that there are satirical elements in the game, like people saying it's sexist because there's commercials on the game that say obviously sexist things, but clearly those commercials are parodies. It's really obnoxious.
Yeah, like this I'm more okay with, because it's really obvious that it's an offensive game. I'm gonna buy it when it comes out, and I'm gonna do it whether it's through Steam or anything else. And because now it's easier than ever to sell your games independently. But yeah, I mean, if the premise of your game is kill as many innocent people as possible, if that is the point, then you should at least expect some online vendors to be not willing to sell it or put it on their stores. Like, at the same time, it'd be better if the developer could more conveniently sell their product, but they don't have a right to, and it's not like we can't understand why they would pull it. They should have seen this coming.
People are accusing Valve of having a double standard because there's so many other, like Greenlight is full of fucking ridiculous shitty games made by 12-year-olds that do feature things like killing innocent people and stuff like that. But they don't have the publicity that this game has, and publicity does matter whether you like it or not. Like that is the reason they pulled the game, is because of the publicity, probably. So you can't compare it to this game that has 3 Greenlight followers and is made by a 12-year-old, and all the Greenlight followers are his immediate family. Like it's not a fair comparison. But people are also saying, like, well, Postal and all these classic like murder simulator games are still on Steam, even though, and now Hatred's been pulled before it's even released. I think that is a more valid argument, but I also think that those games are less overt about, like, Hatred is about a crazy person going on just a massacre rampage, and this is a time in the United States where people are very touchy about that kind of thing, and yeah, I don't blame Valve for wanting to pull it, and they're totally within their rights. I do blame people are jumping to conclusions about that game before it's out. Like, I know that it seems very obvious what that game is. I think it's possible that there is maybe some hidden motives or hidden commentary. We don't know. We don't know yet. All we've seen is like what, 1 trailer, 2 trailers.
I think it's just the one.
Yeah. So I don't know. People are I don't know. People really want to get their panties in a bunch over something, and Hatred's easy to get your panties in a bunch in both directions. Like I think you've got people being ridiculous on both sides on this one, which is a very common theme on the internet. But yeah.
I don't know. There's no way to blame Valve for wanting to pull it. If they get so many people saying, I'm morally offended by you keeping this on your store, as a company, they have to acknowledge that. They can't ignore it. And it's, they don't have that same kind of pushback for something like Postal because it's been out for years and years. It's not a thing. So I don't know. It's just you can't go into things like these talking about it morally or politically first. At the end of the day, it's a company with a bottom line to protect, and you can't expect anything different.
Yeah, and there's someone in the comments right now talking about it being a double standard because of Manhunt, GTA, Postal, etc. That's what we're talking about right now. It's in some ways you're right there, but especially not in the case of like GTA though. I don't see how that's a double standard because the goal of GTA isn't to murder innocent people in a literal rampage, but those games don't have the same publicity and they weren't released at the same hot button issue time that this game's being released. They just don't have the overt offensiveness of this game. They don't. I don't think it's a double standard as much as just they're pulling hatred as a response to probably a shit ton of complaints of it being up on Greenlight. And I don't know. You can dislike the company all you want for that, but it's not censorship, and it's totally within their rights. And I'm fine with what they've done. Frankly, like, who gives a shit?
Right, and at the end of the day, if you have a problem with it being pulled, then the only solution is to apply your own pressure to Valve. If it's going to be in Valve's best interest to put it back, if the number of complaints that it was taken down clearly overwhelmed the number of complaints to take it down, then it's going to be in their best financial interest to put it back up because they'll make sales. Like, if you have a problem with this, then tell Valve, because if they responded to pressure, and they'll respond to pressure again, maybe.
And if you want to play the game, Steam is not the only place that this game is going to be available on.
It's not like this game stopped existing. It only stopped being on Steam.
Yeah, we're talking about one. It's like I wasn't outraged. Like, I think it's stupid that Target in Australia pulled GTA 5. That's not going to stop anyone from buying the game, though. Like, that's such a non-issue. Like, nobody gives a shit. Like, there's so many other venues to buy GTA 5, and although I think that Target was was making a bad decision, and I think that the controversies that caused them to do that are stupid, I don't think it's a big deal that Target chose to do that. It doesn't matter, and it certainly isn't censorship, and people need to stop using that word.
Yeah, I mean, part of the issue comes from the honesty of it. With GTA 5, the release from Target said that they got complaints that the game's objective was to kill women or something, that you would recover health points by killing women. It was something like that. That's just false. That doesn't happen in the game. Something like Hatred, the object of the game is to kill innocent people. Yes, that is true. So at that point, it's an honest objection that people had to the game. It's not like they're lying about it because they have a beef with it, like GTA.
Yeah.
They were telling the truth about the game, and they had a problem with the truth of the game.
It's incredible how long a rumor. Okay, I think it started in GTA. It was either GTA 3 or Vice City when the media frenzy about the objective of GTA being to murder prostitutes for points started. And it's just objectively wrong and really obviously wrong to anyone who's ever played the game. But to this day, a huge number of people are still saying exactly that. Like, it's amazing. Like, it's like the vaccine shit. I saw a thing recently about how Jim Carrey got up in front of the White House and was saying that vaccines cause autism. And it's these things that are like people who bother to educate themselves know are objectively false, like factually wrong, but they get perpetuated for 10, 20, 30 years somehow. It's jeez, I don't even know how it happens. It's bizarre. People are just so willing to just eat bullshit. But anyway, yeah, in the end, the people complaining about GTA 5 are people who aren't going to play it anyway, and Target pulling GTA 5 isn't going to stop anyone from buying it, so don't worry. Don't worry about it. If it was the Australian government saying that you can no longer, and the Australian government is pretty harsh
a really
about video
shitty
games.
track record about censorship.
But apparently you can buy GTA 5 in Australia, so what's the problem? I don't see it. Sorry, not a big deal. I don't think. But moving on.
All right. So this is tangentially games related. The Pirate Bay was raided, which happens seemingly every day, but this was a bigger deal. Every site that mirrored it went down. The whole Pirate Bay is just gone, and it still hasn't gone back up. There's still no official new Pirate Bay. Most of the time it happens pretty quickly, but this time it hasn't. ISO Hunt made a mirror of it, but it's called Old Pirate Bay. It's clearly not meant to be the new thing. It's just like an old archive database of it. And obviously piracy in and of itself isn't related to games, but video games are pirated very frequently. Dragon Age is an example that I talked about earlier. I pirated that game, and my pirating of it is the reason I'm going to buy it. I think it's probably counterproductive to, I don't know. It seems like the status quo is about as good as it's going to get piracy-wise. Like, you can get new customers by having them pirate the product, and it really doesn't see that big of an impact on sales. Have you seen the sales figures for Dragon Age Inquisition?
No, not at
It,
all.
it performed about exactly as expected, as something that without Denuvo would, and that was with like a month or a little less than a month of completely uncracked DRM. So there's a period of perfect legality in which nobody could pirate the game. Everybody who wanted to play it had to purchase it, and they saw exactly the same number of sales. It's pretty telling. You don't lose sales to piracy, and you can only gain it. I'm going to buy the game now, $60 that they wouldn't have gotten if the crack hadn't been released. And I think a lot of people do work that way. Now, obviously, not everybody who pirates is going to eventually buy it, but those same people probably weren't going to buy it in the first place.
Yeah, I do think the statement that piracy doesn't lose sales is false. I mean, yeah, you lose sales because there's a lot of people who pirate instead of buying, but I think overall you gain more from piracy. I think there are certain there are probably there's a lot of situations I think where they probably have been overall hurt, but it's probably because their product wasn't any good. There's games that have been leaked before they were released. I think what was it, Blood Dragon? A lot of people like it. A lot of people hate it. It was leaked before it was released, and they blamed bad sales on piracy because it was leaked. Maybe
such a convenient excuse if you're trying to explain it to a board of directors.
It is, but I do think that it would have sold well. It would have sold a lot better if it weren't leaked, if you couldn't pirate it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, I don't know.
It's a delicate balance. Like, if piracy is really easy and completely unchecked by the law, then everybody's going to pirate it if it's super simple and easy to do. If it's still kind of underground a little bit, if you feel like it's not totally okay on the up and up, then you're going to have a much smaller group of people going to piracy as their option. Like, I can't think of a better scenario or environment for video games to be sold in. A very kind of limited piracy scene, and then the majority of the ease of purchase through Origin or Steam or something, they keep most people purchasing video games with money. And then the relatively small size of pirates, if you had every pirate steal the game and never buy it, it's still not going to affect your sales that much. There just aren't that many pirates. Most people are buying on consoles anyway. It's such a small group that so long as it's kept in check in about exactly the way it is being now, you're not going to lose sales.
Yeah, I don't think it's a non-issue, but I do think that it's a convenient excuse for bad sales, first of all, and it's really annoying and just wrong that developers are ignoring PC because of piracy, and that does happen a lot, where it's just like, fuck it, we're not going to release on PC because they'll pirate all of our games. First of all, you can pirate games on console. Although people who say that, like, how many console players know how to pirate games as opposed to how many PC players know how to pirate games? It's not a fair comparison, but it's it's sad because I think that there's no reason not to release on PC. I don't think the piracy is, unless you have a bad game that you're trying to sell to foolish people. There's no reason to be afraid of piracy, I think, and that's why the websites like Good Old Games their entire model is based on their games are entirely piratable with no effort whatsoever, but they're still successful. They're still doing a lot of they're making a lot of business because people are willing to buy games that they like.
Ease is such a huge deal. Like, buying something through Good Old Games or Steam or Origin could not be simpler. It's so easy to do, and it downloads and installs really fast, seamlessly. There's a barrier to entry to piracy. You have to go to a piracy site that you can't find on Google most of the time because they try to take those off. So you have to know about one of these sites. You have to know that you have to download the torrent. You have to know how to then crack the game. So you have to at least be competent enough to read a README file, which surprisingly not many people are. And as long as purchasing things legally is easier, which it's always going to be, then it's not going to draw sales away because thankfully your average dunderhead doesn't have the drive to pirate things. And I say dunderhead, that's not to say that people who don't pirate things are stupid, because that's not true at all. But your average person who's not engaged with piracy, somebody that's off their radar, it's too hard to get into for them to even stop buying games.
Yeah, and I probably the last time I pirated a game, it must have been at least 4 or 5 years, maybe even. I never pirate, and the reason I don't pirate is because I don't like going through the minimal amount of effort that is required to pirate, and I feel like usually if a game to me is worth going through that small amount of effort to pirate, it's usually worth buying or waiting until it's cheaper. One of those two things, and that's what I do. I either buy it there on the spot because I want it, or I wait till it's cheaper. And I understand that you use it as like a way to demo games. I generally just there's a lot of people on the internet whose opinions I trust a lot, and if I'm on the fence about something, I will go to their opinions and see the gameplay and figure it out that way. I don't think that piracy is necessary for determining whether you want a game, but
most of the time I would agree. But pretty recently, and this has to do with Denuvo, I guess too, I was burned by that approach. So VodiVidya, and I think Veselikov too, but I think Veselikov changed his mind about it later. Lords of the Fallen. VodiVidya basically said that it was not as good as Dark Souls, but it'll sate your thirst for it. It'll be a good enough Souls-like game. It's a little bit clunky, but it's still a great experience. And I played it on that recommendation from this person that I trusted, or especially their opinions about games that are like Souls games. And I purchased the game full price, and Jesus Christ, if it's not the biggest video game purchase regret I've ever had. That game is absolute garbage. It's trash. And maybe people disagree with me, but it's been a long time since I've actively resented a video game this much. And if it had been available, because that was before Denuvo was cracked, if it was available, then I could have checked it myself, realized, wow, this is not something I want to play at all, and then I could have been done with it.
Yeah, I understand that, and that does happen. Like, there are a lot of people who 90% of the time I agree with them 100%, but then the other 10% of the time I don't even understand how they can possibly have that opinion that they have. But just most of the time it's fine, and I don't know. I don't like pirating things. I don't like going through the effort, and I don't know. I don't buy a lot of games anyway. And usually when I do buy a game, it's at least a couple years old, and so I don't spend a lot of money, really. If I buy a game full price, it's because I've been anticipating that game, and I have very good reasons to want to play it, and so I think it's worth my money just based on that alone. Maybe I'll be a little disappointed in it, but I don't. I usually don't regret my. There's very few games where I've just straight up regretted my purchase. I think. Black Ops 1, that was a game where everyone was saying it was great and better than most Call of Duty games, and I bought it and thought it was the worst Call of Duty game by far. That was actually when I stopped playing Call of Duty. Just straight up, just didn't play any more Call of Duty games after that. And God, there was one recently. I forgot what it was, but I bought it and played it for like 2 hours or something, and haven't. Oh well, Shadow of Mordor I paid full price for, and I've played 8 hours of it and haven't played anymore. But I do think that's a pretty good game, and I will complete it
Yeah.
eventually. Like I know I will. So I don't regret that. I do regret the purchase, but I'm not kicking myself over it or anything.
Yeah, and I would say that something like Lords of the Fallen is a pretty rare example. This is the only game in my Steam library where I feel it's a permanent blight, like a black mark stain on my Steam library forever, because you can't relinquish ownership of a game. If I could, I would. I never even want to see the name of it on the side because I know that I paid money for this piece of shit and I can't get rid of it.
Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah, but it's $60 at the end of the day. It's not like the end of the world, but relatively speaking, in video game terms, it's pisses me off.
Let's transition from that to the Dark Souls news. I don't know if there's anything more you wanted to say about that patch, or if we got that all out of the way.
Yeah, there's a little bit. Obviously we talked about how it was region locked now. Hopefully they'll fix that. When the patch did come out, it broke DSFix, specifically the frame rate, and that you couldn't run it at 60 frames per second anymore. And you know the guy Durante who made DSFix in the first place? He had that, well, he's like a PhD in computer science now. He's a really bright guy. And within 23 minutes of when Dark Souls was released, he released DSFix. He's super fast. He's just on it. He's brilliant. And when the Steamworks update happened today, sure enough, within like a couple of hours, DSFix was back up, back working, and now the frame rate and everything works. So it's really impressive. The community for Dark Souls is really great. I would be interested to know, though, because this is a very new patch, a very new update, if other people are having luck with multiplayer. I mean, it was minutes before we started recording that multiplayer seemed to start working for me. If you have experiences with it, you can share that with us, or you can add me on Steam, send it through Twitter. I'm just curious to know what other people's experiences are, because I'm not seeing much posted about it on forums, like on our Dark Souls on Reddit or on the Steam discussion page. It seems to be not much discussion about it, so maybe it was just me, and maybe it's just a temporary problem, but it'd be interesting to see how other people are experiencing it.
And pretty soon, I think we'll be done with the news, and I guess we'll take questions from the chat or talk to the chat or something. I don't know how long we plan to do that. We'll see. But yeah, once we're done with this, we'll take your questions. So start thinking of them now. Moving on, we have here. I think you added this just now, actually.
Yeah.
Assassin's Creed. I don't know anything about this.
This excuse, Jesus Christ. Okay, here we go. Let's see. They use the word refurbish. Okay. Everybody knows that Assassin's Creed Unity is a broken mess. Okay. So we are committed to delivering major performance improvements, which requires that we refurbish the Paris map. And that will take a few more days to hit the high level of quality our players deserve. So this is what? How long has this been since the game came out? It's months, right? Was it late October?
I don't want to say months, plural, but I think it was early November or something,
okay.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it's a huge deal. The game's broken. It's just broken. There's no two ways around it. Terrible performance. And, they already had to cancel their season pass, or at least give everybody the DLC for free, and anybody who bought the season pass now has some other Ubisoft game for free. So they've already had to backpedal, and now they're having to delay this patch even more. It's not looking good for Ubisoft.
Ubisoft's a mess. I do think the idea that they're having to delay it to refurbish Paris is actually probably accurate, which doesn't make it any better, because I think what they're probably doing is having to go in there and
remove NPCs,
make things lower res, or remove NPCs, or remove objects. Like, that's probably what they're doing. They're just kind of brute force, like, taking the machete to it,
I don't know. It's something about the phrasing of it seems extra funny to me. We're gonna refurbish it, like it's some, I don't know.
They've been so. It's amazing how. I hate to use this word because it's so often used in a different way, but how tone deaf they are. Not just Ubisoft, but game companies in general, but especially Ubisoft recently. Um, with the crew, where it was like, oh, you don't want to. I know that people don't like how we've been withholding or putting these review embargoes on our games, so we're just not even sending out review copies for this one. Like, they thought that was a good thing to say. Like, they thought that was okay. Like, how can you think they're so? And then like, you took a different position. I don't know if we talked about this, but you took a different position than I did on their whole on the Assassin's Creed being leaked. You seemed to think that it was that the next Assassin's Creed was leaked like a couple of weeks ago, and you seemed to think it was intentional.
That wasn't quite. So my position on it was Assassin's Creed has been this annualized sequel churning series for years now. If you didn't think that they had at least 2 or 3 games already in the pipeline, already in development, then you're kidding yourself. Like, everybody knows that Ubisoft was already working on a new Assassin's Creed. There was no doubt about that. Now, they have this terrible launch of Assassin's Creed Unity. I'm not saying that they intentionally leaked it, but God, if it wouldn't be convenient if an Assassin's Creed game other than Unity got some press attention instead. Like, they're maybe not going to leak it, but maybe they're not going to, have as strict controls over who gets to see what. You know what I mean?
I know what you're saying, but
I think they would. They're smart enough probably to keep their hands clean. But at the very least, if I want to make this the safest, most well-founded claim I can, I would say that Ubisoft is not unhappy that it leaked.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think it's just there's two ways of looking at it, because I think to me it's inconvenient because you're trying to kind of you want to draw attention away from Assassin's Creed Unity, but I think the only thing that a leak of the next Assassin's Creed game does is draw attention back to Unity. I think everyone just starts talking about Assassin's Creed again and says, "Oh yeah, wow, another Assassin's Creed game, great!" Like now in everyone's head, now when this game is actually, well, they've already announced it, they've already like acknowledged the leak and said, "Yeah, it's a shame it was leaked, but it does exist." I think the only thing that does is when they start showing that game, everyone's going to be thinking of Unity because now it's fresh in their mind. Like the first time they heard about this game was in the middle of the Unity fiasco. I don't, from a PR perspective, I can't imagine that that's an overall positive effect. Like I think that they would want to stay away from Assassin's Creed as much as possible and keep it out of the public eye for at least a few months so that people kind of get over it. And then when you announce the next game, people haven't forgotten about the last one, but it's not fresh,
I don't know. I think I'd have to disagree there. That I think there's something to be said for giving people something else Assassin's Creed to talk about. If you're going to have a discussion about Assassin's Creed and Unity is the only thing out there, then that's all you can talk about. But they can maybe at least, and maybe not in terms of conversations like this on a podcast where we're really uncovering every stone leaving no stone unturned and discussing in depth. But if it's just a conversation between two guys, like, hey, did you see the new screenshot of the new Assassin's Creed? Yeah, that sounds cool. If there's some way to, in terms of your average conversation, steer that dialogue somewhere else other than the train wreck of Unity, I think that works to their advantage.
Maybe. I mean, yeah, we're just talking about different theories really at this point. There's no way for us to know. But
right.
If I were a marketer, my opinion would be try to stay away from it. I definitely don't think it was leaked intentionally. I don't think that any company is going to leak their game intentionally this far before release and this soon after the last one, no matter what their situation is. But they did acknowledge it, and they didn't have to acknowledge it. They could have just kind of ignored it. Although if there were screenshots and shit, so I don't know how much of an option ignoring it is. But Ubisoft games leak like crazy. They've got someone like high up who's just leaking shit. Anyway, yeah, fucking Ubisoft, man. Who's gonna buy an Assassin's Creed game after this shit? Whatever. Next thing on the news, I also don't know anything about this, so you take it away.
So DMC, the fuck you Devil May Cry remake, is getting a re-release. DMC the Definitive Edition. But they're also releasing a special edition of Devil May Cry 4, which people seem to be excited about. I haven't really played much Devil May Cry, but most people I've heard absolutely hate DMC, that reboot thing with extra edgy Dante. But a Devil May Cry 4 re-release sounds pretty cool. That might be a good way to get into it. I mean,
I've heard. I don't know. I've never played a Devil May Cry game, so I can't speak from personal experience at all. But my general, from what I've gathered, it seems like huge Devil May Cry fans didn't like the remake. That was all fuck you and shit, because they changed the character and they were just totally disrespectful of the original series and all that stuff, which I totally understand. But I also have heard that people who just get into it for the first time love it and think it's a great game. They don't necessarily love the character, but they think it's fun at least. And there's also I know a lot of Devil May Cry fans who kind of say, yeah, I got past the stupid shit and just had fun with the game. So apparently, from what I've gathered, it isn't a bad game. It's just that it did a lot of things to piss people off and generally had a not great writing or characters.
from what I can tell, and again, this is not a very good point to make because I've never played it, but from what I've heard from others, it's a good game but a bad reboot. It's not. It would be a good first game in a new series, but gameplay itself apparently regressed from the other games, and then obviously you got the characterization, which is torpedoed completely. So, I don't know. I can understand absolutely why fans of Devil May Cry would be pissed about DMC, but it is. I don't think anybody can argue with, or at least not really argue, but it would be hard to find fault with a re-release of Devil May Cry 4. And both of these games are going to be re-released at 1080p and 60 FPS on consoles, which is a nice thing. It's good to see more games targeting both of those instead of one of those. There's been too many early next-gen releases that have been either 60 FPS or 1080p with sacrificing the frame rate. Ground Zeroes was one of the first to do it properly, and I'm glad to see more turning out that way on PS4 and Xbox One.
Yeah, seeing a lot more games do that, or at least acknowledge, like make official statements about it, even if they say like, yeah, sorry, we're not going to be 60 FPS. Like at least they're acknowledging the fact that a lot of people are concerned about it. It's a step in the right direction, definitely. But in the end, it's still fucking consoles.
And this is purely speculative. Well, okay. Before I say that, it is important though, the consoles, because PC is such a small market that we usually get the table scraps of consoles. That if PC versions come out, they're basically always bottlenecked by what consoles can handle. You're not going to get super high-res textures and everything and very demanding base settings for the game because they have to be able to run on consoles most of the time. So when the bar gets raised for consoles, they get raised for PC, even though the PC has always been able to handle more. So I think it is important that consoles get these improvements, and I don't think that you would disagree. But also, this is purely speculative. I think that YouTube rolling out 60 frames per second support on their videos for Chrome and IE. Chrome is the most popular browser in the world right now, so that's the biggest deal. I think that's huge for the pressure of games developers to target 60 FPS, because it used to be that there was no easy way for your average Joe to see 60 frames per second footage of anything. They would have to download a 60 frames per second video file from somewhere and watch it locally on their computer. Your average Call of Duty player isn't going to do that. But I think there's a reason, too, that Call of Duty itself is more popular than things like Battlefield on consoles. And I think it's because your average Joe can tell the difference between 30 and 60 frames per second. It does feel smoother. And if that same average Joe can go on YouTube and see footage of these games and see it running at 60 frames per second, your average fellow who watches a PewDiePie video and can see 60 frames per second, they'll become more aware of the difference. And then it's not going to be so easy to pass off 30 frames per second products as being acceptable anymore, because anybody, your mom, could click a link on Facebook that takes her to a 60 frames per second YouTube video. It's so accessible now that the difference is, there's no way to hide that difference anymore, or not necessarily hide it, but the difference is totally transparent.
Yeah, I think it's huge. YouTube supporting it is huge because You're right. I don't think, like, even I, a lot of the time, if someone just asks me, do you think this is running at 60 or 30 frames, it'll take me a minute. Like, I'll have to watch the camera shifting quickly to tell. I just don't. It's not something I've ever paid much attention to. But if I start playing, well, there are games like Counter-Strike or something where if I'm playing at 30 compared to 60, then I will definitely notice. But I think it is something that your average Joe definitely feels. They don't know it. I think the average Joe doesn't have any idea that Call of Duty is running at 60 frames per second. They don't care. But they know they have more fun with it. They know that it feels better. That's the word that I constantly hear Call of Duty players say, is that the guns feel better, just the game feels better. Well,
And it does.
a lot of that probably has to do with definitely.
Console.
Yeah, and I think that has a ton to do with 60 frames, and the developers know it, because otherwise they wouldn't bother with 60 frames. It's hard to keep frames that high, you know.
Now, what's the curious thing though is going to be, obviously consoles are now getting 1080p 60 frames per second, so maybe it's not going to be that big of a problem, but I wonder how often like a PC footage of a game is going to get shown on YouTube, like a multi-platform that's also on PC. They'll see 60 frames per second footage of the game, buy it for a console that can only run it in 30, and then feel gypped. Like I can see that happening. It hasn't really happened yet.
I can see that happening, but it already happens with graphics. Like, they already do that with like Far Cry and shit. Like Far Cry, even for the PC release, the footage that they showed months before its release was completely different graphically from the highest settings on the PC at release. So that's been happening already, and it's terrible and shitty and lame. But yeah, that's going to happen. But it doesn't. It's no different from from what's already happening.
Bullshotting. It's a new breed of bullshots.
Yeah, definitely. I think that wraps up our news, unless there's something you thought of last minute.
That's all I've got.
Do we have any? First of all, everyone in chat, start asking your questions now. We'll start answering them. But do we have any questions in the bank?
While we wait for questions to roll in, somebody named MCU said something a while back that I want to address. They said this is about Valve pulling hatred from the Steam Greenlight. MCU said, yes, they have the right, but it's still censorship. Censorship doesn't need to be done by a government. It's just the suppression of works or ideas for political and moral reasons. I think that's not a good argument.
I don't think that's true. I don't think that's the definition. I think censorship is by definition by a government. I'm sure there are probably entities that define censorship in a different way, but I think if you look up in a normal dictionary what censorship is, it probably uses either the word government or authority, and Valve is neither of those.
I'd like to abstract, though, from just whether or not it meets some laid out definition of censorship. If we just talk about the spirit of the word, it implies some kind of abridgment of freedom, like your freedom to speak has been stepped on if you're being censored. But if we're really looking at it from a perspective of freedom, whether people are free to express themselves and make this kind of game, you also have to acknowledge the freedom of a private entity to sell what it chooses. So to accuse someone like Valve of censorship, that they're committing this kind of immoral act of ruining other people's freedom, you're ignoring their right to not sell what they don't want to sell.
Exactly.
Are you saying that they have to sell things that they don't want to, and if they don't, that's censorship? I have trouble buying that.
Yeah, should the government be forcing Valve to sell this game for equal rights or something like that? It's very hypocritical. It's the typical hypocrisy of those kinds of arguments that I see online, of people not thinking, like, people thinking, oh, these people are being oppressed or offended or abused, therefore we should oppress or abuse or offend other people. Like, that's an oversimplification, but yeah, exactly what you said. I have nothing to add to that. Like, you're saying exactly what I'm thinking.
Yeah, it's basically this. You can say whatever you want, but I don't have to let you say whatever you want in my house. There is no censorship happening here. Let's be perfectly frank.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, we got a lot of questions and comments kind of in a row here, but here's a simple one. Are you watching the dub or sub of NHK?
Oh, of
Um,
course the dub.
yeah.
No, sorry. No, God, no. Of course the sub. Jesus
I
Christ.
know how much you
That
like
was
your dub
bad. No,
animes.
no, 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 not at all.
Uh, favorite MGS game and character? We can knock that one out pretty quick, I think, although we could probably talk about it for hours if we wanted. My favorite was definitely Snake Eater by far, and my favorite character was the boss.
Hmm.
So, there you go.
Somebody said, how does it feel to have your world record beat to dust? Yeah, I just looked it up. Apparently somebody did beat my Win Fortress record by, I think, 0.9 seconds.
Oh,
So I'm going to have
shit.
to go back and revisit that. I mean, that run could have been improved easily. So it's just going to be a matter of tightening it up even more. So, yeah, I'm not too worried about it. I'm coming for you, Fluta.
Yeah, my Arma group still plays Arma every weekend in response to Jason. Um, I don't know if I'm going to keep up. I haven't been uploading videos at all recently, and I would like to upload one before the end of the year, but I don't know if I have the time for it because I barely have enough time to play Arma in the first place, let alone to edit a video out of it. And I also don't want my entire channel to be about Arma. So, but we do play it every weekend. I'm still playing it.
Somebody asked, hold on, I lost track of it a little bit. I think it was a little bit before. But it was basically, oh, here it is, by Bolt of Beef. So exactly how important do you guys think frame rate is to gameplay? Do you want to tackle it first?
I'll tackle it first. I know our opinions are going to be probably a little different, but I only care about frame rate like a lot if it's a very fast-paced game that requires fast reactions and where you can basically games where you can tell very obviously that 30 frames does not feel as good as 60. But if it's a game like let me think of an example. I would say something like an RPG. You know, if I'm playing Skyrim or whatever, and it's 30 frames instead of 60, I'd much rather have 60. I think 60 feels better and looks better, but it's not at all necessary for the gameplay. Like it's not there's not enough fast reaction things going on where it's necessary. So I don't mind playing those games at 30, although I much prefer playing them at 60.
Yeah, I'm basically with you. I'd probably go a little stronger, though, on the importance of frame rate. That, yeah, it's not going to be a totally experience-ruining problem if it's a lower frame rate. Like, Demon Souls is one of my favorite games ever. That's at 30 frames per second. But Dark Souls on PC at 60 frames per second just feels infinitely better to play, even though it's basically the same gameplay. That you can drastically improve the experience by upping the frame rate. And I'm a little bit disappointed that Bloodborne is going to be 1080p 30 frames per second because I would much rather take that sacrifice in resolution. But I think probably a little different though is that the different. Do you have a 120 or 144 hertz monitor?
I don't think so. I think I bought 60.
Okay, because to me at least the difference between 144 or 120 and 60 is as apparent as the difference between 60 and 30. Like, it's such a huge difference. And I thought it was going to be less significant. When I got it, I thought, maybe I'm just wasting dosh here. Maybe it's not worth it. But as soon as I launched up CSGO for the first time, running at 144 hertz, it's just so much smoother. I know I would never want to go back to 60 for that game.
Yeah,
It's a big deal.
I would like to see that in person because I think 60 is fine. Like I have no complaints about 60. Even 30, I rarely, like I said, I rarely notice it if it's not a fast-paced game. What I have started to notice, this is kind of a different issue that I'm just bringing up out of nowhere. I apologize for that. But what I have noticed is watching movies on a big screen, the low frame rate. This has a lot to do with the way that a lot of modern films are being filmed, but the low frame rate is really starting to get to me. Although movies have the advantage of motion blur that video games can't reproduce in the same way, where the frame rate isn't as noticeable because of it. In movies where the camera's panning, especially if it's panning quite quickly, like between characters or something, oh my god, I start like it makes me almost sick, like having to jerk during those
Really?
camera pans. Like I've started to notice it really badly. Like next time you're watching a movie, if the camera pans, watch an object. Just follow an object with your eyes, and it started to bother me a lot.
I don't know. I'm able to separate those things in my mind. Like 24 frames per second movies don't bother me, and I think that has to do with being in control of it. Like when you're physically moving the perspective, when you're changing the point of view in the camera yourself, then you can feel that sluggishness. Like you know that your movement isn't. It's really hard to describe these kinds of things because they're very much like sensation, vague, wishy-washy feelings. But I guess if I'm describing the huge difference between 144 and 60 on CS:GO, it's less about what I'm seeing, and it's more of like a feeling in my hands almost. Like I can, it's very much related to how I'm controlling my character. That feels smoother. And if I'm
Yeah.
not in charge of the perspective of the camera, of the point of view, it doesn't feel like that big of a deal to me. And so that I don't get like motion sick watching movies because I'm not the one who has to move the camera around, so I don't have to deal with that sluggishness myself.
Yeah, I think that's legitimate because I mean, it's hard to notice obviously at high frames, but if you play a game at like really low frame rate, like 10 and below, then you will actually definitely like be able to see the difference between when you start moving your mouse and when it reacts. Like there's going to
Mhm.
be, a millisecond of difference or more, and that is definitely noticeable. And however minuscule that difference is in a high frame rate situation, it is still there. So I think what you're saying is legitimate, but we are talking about very small differences. We're talking about feelings rather than actual like
Well, I wouldn't say the
major
differences are
effects.
small. I would say they're hard to pin down or to concretize descriptively. Like it's hard to say without feeling it yourself what the big deal is between 144 and 60 frames. But once you feel it, it's very clear. It's night and day.
Yeah. Um, I I certainly enjoy playing games at 60 rather than 30, and I do want to try out 144, but I don't want the kind of computer that I need to run a game at 144 frames. I can't
I
afford
mean,
that right now.
I would rather, because I've got a laptop as well, and when I'm not here, and like if I'm off home somewhere, I use the laptop, but I'll sometimes use the same monitor because even if I have to turn the settings down, like way way down to get 144, it's still worth it to me. Like the smoothness is significant, and that's probably one of the weirdest things about the way Dragon Age Inquisition is presented. So it supports 144 frames per second, which isn't like a standard feature, surprisingly. Like it's not many actually support frame rates that high, so I'm surprised to see them do it, and I'm glad that they did it. But that makes it all the more jarring when it goes into the cutscenes and it's locked at 30. It's such a strange. It's like they clearly had kind of enthusiast upper level, very uncommon monitor refresh rates supported, but at the same time they have this entire what's basically the meat of the game is the story segments. Those are all locked at 30. It's weird. It makes it feel strange to play sometimes.
All right. Well, let's see. Are there any more? I
I
don't
think
think
there were a
there's.
few. Boone Bonds. I think that's Boone from ABF, right? Yeah,
It
yeah.
is, yeah.
Okay, so when we have special guests like Vadi Vidya, Fitz, Flimsy. Well, I mean, I'm not going to speak to any of those people in particular, but we are going to eventually have guests on the show. That's planned. We kind of want to get it rolling, get it to have an identity of its own before we, you know, open the floodgates. That's why we're kind of feeling out this live show now, because we wanted to be comfortable producing the show ourselves before we kind of let spectators in on the picture. So, I think we're definitely getting to that point where we can easily and comfortably interact with guests or interact live. So, yeah, that's definitely planned for sure.
Yeah. That'll be fun. I don't know who will want to be a guest, and I don't know who we're going to ask to be guests, but I know that there are at least a couple people who have expressed interest, a couple of fans who've expressed interest, and so it'll be something we want to incorporate. I have no idea if we'll get anyone of note on it, we'll see. But
Yeah,
I
there's
do want to
nothing about
respond. I do want to respond to what Jamal was saying about frame rate in movies because he says because a movie is directed to be at 24 frames per second, it's filmed around that frame rate, and therefore it doesn't detract. The low FPS doesn't detract as much. I think that is. I don't think that's true. I don't see how you direct a film differently to accommodate a lower frame rate. I don't know what you would do to accommodate or
Well, there is a lot that would have to change. So what they can kind of get away with movies is that if they're filmed at 24 frames per second with significant motion blur that interpolates the colors there, or it's not really interpolation because it's an analog process of a sensor, but you can kind of, you're not seeing the background very clearly all the time or while the camera's in motion. But if the frame rate is higher, then you're going to be able to much more clearly make out objects in the background, like a book on the shelf, or the wallpaper, the way it's kind of attached to the wall. It's going to be more clearly defined, which is a good thing, but it does require more care on the part of the director. They can't just leave those things as tertiary details because now they're going to be clearly visible, even in motion.
yeah. But I think the biggest thing that you touched on there is the idea of motion blur, that films can do a certain kind of motion blur, and I don't want to get into the technical aspects of it, especially because I don't really understand them 100%, but films can do a kind of motion blur that video games can't, because video games would have to predict the future to do that kind of motion blur, basically. Like, every frame in a film is between two other frames. So that motion blur feels much smoother and looks less distracting than what video games do to recreate motion blur. And so films, definitely the lower frame rate does not detract from a film nearly as much as it detracts from a video game, and that's not what I was saying. All I was saying is I've started to notice low frame rates in films, and it's bothering me. And I watched The Hobbit in 48 frames or whatever, and I thought it was good, and people said that it was making them feel uneasy and crap, and I don't understand why, and I didn't get that at all. I thought it looked good, so I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't mind The Hobbit's frame rate either. I think most of the problem with that are it's not a very good looking movie, really. You can clearly see the decrease in production values between that and Lord of the Rings.
I don't know if, I mean, the technology has increased since the Lord of the Rings, but the
practical effects and the care isn't there.
I wouldn't say I don't think the production value is any less. I don't think they're spending any less than they spent on the Lord of the Rings, on The Hobbit, but I think that I don't even know if I would say the care, but just the whole idea of what, like, the philosophy behind the special effects and everything, like the scene with the goblins and everything. It's like, just load as much as you fucking can on the screen and have a bunch of shit happening, and it's the George Lucas theory of filmmaking and applied to Lord of the Rings. Or I have a lot of problems with the Hobbit films, and I can go into them, but my main issue with them is that they're trying to be like Lord of the Rings rather than be The Hobbit, and that bothers me a ton because The Hobbit is nothing like Lord of the Rings.
My biggest issue with it is just the story, the way they spread it out.
Yeah, like, it doesn't work right.
Like, so The Lord of the Rings were 3 books. I don't even care that much about Lord of the Rings. Like, I'm not a big fan at all, but, I really like those movies. And those were 3 long books. They had to cut material from each one to fit them into those time frames. They clearly were having to make them tighter, make them denser, and make 3 movies of 3 books. The Hobbit, much shorter book than any of the Lord of the Rings books. And it's 1 book, too, just 1. But they still split that 1 story into 3 full-length Peter Jackson movies that are way over 2 hours, like, what, 2.5 hours for each one or something like that?
They're way too long. Way longer than I thought they would be.
Super long. They're stretching out this 1 short book into 3 full-length movies, and it just doesn't work. They're so slow, and
yeah,
I can't get behind that.
I actually just stopped paying. I started watching the second one, and I stopped paying attention halfway through. Granted, I was drinking with women and stuff, but I just stopped paying attention. Like, I couldn't watch the movie anymore. I was just like, I don't even know what's happening anymore or care. But you get to the halfway point, and not a lot has happened, and I know what's going to happen, and it's just not something that I want to see. Another thing about The Hobbit is I read The Hobbit, and I never would think, yeah, I want a movie made out of this. Like, it just doesn't seem like it's the kind of story that applies well to a film, and just I don't like hardly anything about those movies except Martin Freeman. I think he's a good actor.
He's a fantastic actor. He's great. He's really good. He carries that movie, I think. All of them.
Without him, those movies would be straight up bad.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Have you? What's the? I forgot the name because again, I'm not like a Tolkien buff or anything. I know very little about the worlds or anything. All I know is the basics, and I know that there's another thing called the Silmarillion, which completes more of the world, but I haven't read it, so again, I'm not sure. Is it Thorin, the name of that dwarf?
He's the leader.
Thorin Oakenshield.
Oakenshield, that's right.
Thorin Oakenshield. That actor is so boring to me. Everything he says is just the same, like, my honor, like, my honor, the honor of my honor, we will do this for honor. And it just is not convincing. Martin Freeman had just so much heart. I don't know what he's actually like at all, but he just seems like such a sweet guy. Like, he's got such spirit. Every line he says is great. This other guy, it's just the same tone. My honor, the honor of my dwarven people. God.
I totally agree with that. In the book, there's a little bit of that in the book because he's kind of like, the book's a lighthearted book for the most part. It was written for kids, although I wouldn't particularly recommend it to a lot of kids, but it was written for kids. It was written lightheartedly. There's a lot of comedy in it and not a lot of seriousness, not nearly as much in the film. But he is like the one character that's always serious, and it's almost like a running joke. And they do this maybe a little bit in the movie, but I don't think so. But like every time he starts speaking, like everyone has to like go, oh boy, he's speaking again. You know?
Yeah.
It's not as bothersome in a book though because you read a few lines and it's done. But in the movie, it's like he starts talking and you just go, oh god, and you don't want that. And at least what they could do is do more like reaction shots of the characters. Like, it doesn't even necessarily have to be funny responses to the characters, but have something except this monotone like, oh, the history of my people and da, 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 da. And it's like nobody wants this from this movie or any movie. Like, it's not interesting. It's just boring. But yeah, I took an entire class on Tolkien. I read The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, and The Silmarillion, and like 3 texts that they're vaguely based on from like Viking history and stuff. Like it was a crazy class. So I know all sorts of shit about that stuff, and that's part of the reason that my enjoyment of Shadow of Mordor is a little bit diminished, is because like they really butcher that lore. Like, Shadow of Mordor is to Lord of the Rings as Halo 4 is to the Halo trilogy.
Seriously?
Yes, definitely.
Oh, wow.
Like, that is a perfect comparison in my opinion. Like, totally 100%.
The story was totally forgettable to me. Like, I am not big on Tolkien, so I didn't notice like contradictions. I just kind of, it's not that good a story. I just didn't pay attention to most of it because it hardly matters. But if there was like active lore butchery going on during those scenes, I can understand why people would like it a little less.
There is. I wouldn't.
Is there like an example of?
I don't know if I can go into detail because I don't remember enough from the Silmarillion to really like talk authoritatively about it. But there is some lore butchering, not a lot of butchering. But it's a lot of
just being
the whole idea of him being a ranger that can access the spirit world and all that shit is just like this. It's just pulled out of their asses, like totally nothing, like not at all based on any kind of Tolkien scripture or anything like that. And then it turns out he's the elf friend or whatever. That guy is like a huge influence in the history of Middle Earth. And what is he doing? Like, following you around to save your wife or something? Like, what the fuck? Why is he even a character in the game? And then, like, I don't know. I haven't gotten to the end of the game, but I've heard things about the end of that game which sound completely ridiculous. And why is Gollum in that fucking game? Well, I know why he's in the
That
game
felt weird.
because they can show a trailer with Gollum in it and people will go, "That's in the movie," and then get the game. But
That
yeah,
felt really weird.
yeah,
He didn't feel like he had any purpose to be there.
way out of place. And not only is he out of place, they as they butchered his character as much as you can butcher a character. Like they totally got the way that he acts and talks and speaks completely wrong. I think talks and speaks. They got it completely wrong in my opinion. Like they made him comic relief, and that's okay for Gollum. I think Gollum can be comic relief, but they did it in the completely wrong way, and it doesn't work at all. And just oh god, that was the most cringeworthy. Like when you meet Gollum was the most cringeworthy thing, and then they even start playing like that stereotypical like, by the way, this is a funny moment music where it like plays like lighthearted like piano chords really quickly and stuff. Like oh god, it just I was just cringing the whole time. What are you doing?
I was just like, I dropped something on the ground.
It's gonna be weird in an audio podcast.
Oh well. So somebody asked, I forget who it was. It was something about blah blah blah. Okay, how do you watch your anime? We're talking about our streams, torrents, Blu-rays, or DVDs. I'm a pretty big stickler for quality on that, so try to find the best quality downloads I can. Blu-ray is obviously the best option. I would go for that whenever possible. But if Blu-rays are hard to come by or not around, I'll usually go on a site like nya.se, and they usually have pretty high quality downloads. They're pretty careful about quality too. They'll like go through and they'll mark with green kind of CSS decorations the ones that are determined to be of higher quality than the other releases. So it's a pretty good resource to use.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh yeah, someone mentioned the third movie. Is that out? The Hobbit movie, the third one?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know it was even out.
Neither did I. I didn't know that until today. Like I no idea, but yeah, somebody told me that it came out today. So.
Yeah. Well, that movie. Okay. That movie, that entire movie, I think takes up 2 or 3 chapters in the book.
Are you serious?
Yeah. The entire battle of the 5 armies that the movie's subtitle is based on, that is like a paragraph where Bilbo Baggins gets knocked out, and then he wakes up after the battle. So they've based that entire movie, almost the entire thing, I assume, on stuff that happens while Bilbo is knocked out in the book, and they recount like what happens in the battle, but it's less than a chapter. Like it's tiny. So they've made that a movie. When I heard that the second movie was going to end with like the slaying of the dragon or whatever, or like right before that or whatever, I was like, okay, that's the end of the book basically. But goddamn, I'll probably see it eventually. I don't know. I still haven't completed the second movie. Like I said, I stopped paying attention halfway through, so I don't know. But let's see. Someone asked, overall, did you not like Shadow Mordor in any way? No, that's not true. I enjoyed playing it. I haven't completed it yet, and I plan to. I think it's fun enough to complete. I don't think it's a particularly great game.
Yeah.
I don't think it deserved to be was it a GOTY contender? I think it was, which it didn't deserve.
Yeah, it didn't deserve that. It's not replayable or anything, but it's fun.
It's also like
it's good.
It's also insanely easy, which
Oh yeah.
I don't think that's inherently a bad thing, though. A lot of people act like there's the video of what's his name, some YouTuber that's gotten kind of popular recently, and there's a video of him like smashing on the space bar over and over while his monitor is off, but he's recording the game footage and he's just beating the shit out of orcs like he's doing fine, and all he's doing is smashing on the space bar. And yeah, you could do that, but that's not what makes the game fun. The game is not challenging, but you can still do fun things by being creative with the combat, and it gives you a lot of options, which are entertaining. It's just that you're not forced to use those options, which, I mean, whatever. It's still fun.
It's got a very strange difficulty curve. It starts out harder. The hardest part is at the very beginning.
Definitely.
When you have few abilities. Once you can just hit one button to mind control any orc you want, it just becomes completely trivial, because then all you have to do is like get 5 hits on anybody, and they don't even have to be good hits or hard to execute hits. Just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you have this chargeable thing that you can just instantly mind control any orc around you. And then there's another skill that's also easy to get that lets you mind control 2 orcs per streak. So then all it comes down to by the end is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Take 2 out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Take 2 out. 1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
4, 5. And then while you do this, you're getting more orcs on your side that make it go even faster. The best moments I had with it were toward the beginning of the game. I think it was the first war chief I fought. That was fun because I was pretty outmatched at that point. I didn't upgrade many of my abilities at all, so I really felt like I was getting chased by a horde of orcs, and that I was hopelessly outnumbered.
I was watching your
outmatched.
stream. I think the moment that you're talking about right now, where you go for one war chief and then like 5 more show up, and like
Yeah,
every time
that's
one
so
shows up,
cool.
you're going like, oh dear, and you're having to like run away from this. It's literally a horde of orcs. Like it was like there were probably like 50 of them, which is
Yeah.
cool, and it's a fun moment, and like it's legitimately like you will die definitely if you try to fight them. Like you have to run away. But then towards the end of the game, you can pretty much fight any number of orcs you want and live. But again, like you have to go into it with the right mindset of saying like, okay, I want to complete this mission without alerting guards if I can, or whatever. You know, like I want to get as close to I want to assassinate the orc chief without just fighting my way to him. And if you self-impose challenges like that, that's like Far Cry 3. A lot of people fucking hate Far Cry 3 because they just say, oh, it's the same boring shit, liberating outpost after outpost. Well, that's because you're not making it fun for yourself. You have to like go to an outpost and say, okay, I have to do this without setting off the alarm, and then it becomes fun. Or I want to do this with just a sniper rifle or something like that. Like, make it fun for yourself. Don't just games don't have to just be complete the objective.
No, I have to be told exactly how to have.
Yeah, like Metal Gear. If you play Metal Gear just to get to the end, I don't know. You'll probably still have quite a bit of fun with it, but like that game gives you a multitude of ways to get around guards, and they're all entertaining in their own little ways. You can put a magazine down on the ground, and the guard will come over and read it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's what makes those games really interesting and fun. If you just go through using the sleeping dart on every single guard, you're not going to have the same experience. So, yeah.
It's Metal Gear is one of those stealth games where it's actually fun to occasionally be lethal, because there's so many tools at your disposal that you don't want to limit yourself.
I think we're winding down here. Let's see. There's a question to me about when are you guys and Cricken going to team back up, which I'm pretty sure is a joke question, or I hope is one. But I mean, I don't know. Kraken's at school right now, and will be for a while, obviously, because he's at a university. So he's not playing a lot of video games with any of his friends, and I don't know. We just haven't done a lot together recently. I don't know if we will again.
Yeah,
Whatever.
and I've never said a word to the guy, so I don't know what you mean by you guys.
But yeah, I wouldn't keep my fingers crossed or something. I don't know about it, but whatever. There's no ill feelings between me and Kraken or anything. Would Far Cry 3 be a better game? It forced me to move which USB slot my mouse is in. I don't know. Oh, is that a Far Cry 4 thing?
No, I think he's making a Psycho Mantis reference.
Oh, right. About moving the. I thought he was making it. There was a glitch in Far Cry 4 where if you had an Xbox controller in, I think the game would crash. Like,
Really?
yeah, like it was a really stupid, really bad glitch. I think they fixed it in like one of the first batches, but still. But yeah, that's Psycho Mantis. Yeah. I don't know. I wish more games were as creative as Metal Gear games. God damn. Metal Gear really did spoil me a lot, and like every time I play a modern video game after having played Metal Gear, not that Metal Gears are like perfect games, but they think so far outside of the box, and there's so few games willing to do that kind of thing now. That's what I loved about Rhythm Doctor, to bring up a running theme in our podcast. Rhythm Doctor, again, not going to spoil it for anyone who hasn't played it, because this really is kind of a spoiler. I think it's better if you experience this for yourself. But you get to that first boss fight, and like they were very creative with it. They went outside of what you need to go, like with a rhythm game. Like they spent a lot of time to make that really interesting and unique. And yeah, good for them.
Yeah, if anything that defies expectations is just interesting, more interesting for it. And so, yeah, I don't even know what the point was for that, but I don't know.
Yeah.
It wouldn't fit Far Cry to have like a change your port thing, but if there was
Well,
some stuff that was super unique, like if we want to talk about the secret ending, is that kind of common knowledge right now? Does that sort of count as a spoiler,
I've
or
heard
should we
of
keep
it.
it vague?
Keep it vague.
Okay, so keeping it vague, there's a way within the first 15 minutes to trigger an ending to the game. It's kind of cool. It's
Oh,
hard
I
to
did hear
stumble
about
on.
that. Yeah.
It's hard to stumble on, but if you do a certain thing in a very specific way and don't do what it basically tells you to do or implies for you to do, then the game will end, and it's a different ending. It
It's
kind of ties up the story too.
from
And
what
you
I've
gotta sort of-
heard. From what I've heard, it's something you would never do in a video game, but it's something you would obviously do in real life. And that is totally Metal Gear. Like that is straight up Kojima alley. But yeah, Far Cry 4 and Far Cry 3, all the Far Cry games for that matter, have done actually. I think they're given a little less credit than they're deserved for. They do some stuff that does fall pretty far outside of the box. Like Far Cry 2 is you had malaria in Far Cry 2, and you had to take pills to keep it away,
which
and
was
you had to
annoying as hell. But
annoying as like I'm not saying it was a great game mechanic, but they tried to do something interesting, and I do think it was interesting. That I like that game despite itself, almost because of some of the most annoying features. I do like that malaria thing. As annoying as it is, the first time I died of malaria in that game, I was like, all right, that's kind of cool actually. But all those games do like Far Cry 4 has like the dream sequences. Far Cry 3 has some dream sequences that get pretty crazy, and yeah, nobody should say that those games aren't trying to be creative at least a little bit. But I do wish video games are such a perfect vehicle for creativity. Like you can your audience is interacting with what you are creating. Like that is the highest level of like
yeah,
of immersion that you can get, and I feel like we aren't taking advantage of that nearly as much as I know we aren't taking advantage. Everyone knows that we aren't taking advantage of that as much as we can. But I hope we get more of it.
yeah, definitely.
I don't think there's any more questions really.
Yeah, looks like those. Yeah, we got basically everything. Every real question.
Yeah, there was one question actually we missed that was a totally legitimate one about handhelds, which we can just knock out really quickly actually, because I don't want to.
Oh,
it was a very legitimate question.
Oh, I didn't see it. Yeah,
They,
by Jamal.
yeah.
Okay, so the question is, how do you guys feel about handhelds on the market? Have favorite games on the Vita or 3DS? So do you own either of these?
Nope.
Okay, well, I don't own a Vita, but I own a 3DS, and there are a few standouts on it. There's Fire Emblem Awakening, Smash 3DS, obviously, and there's some other stuff too. I forget what. The Bit Trip release, Bit Trip Saga, that was pretty good on 3DS. I'm sure there's other stuff that's just slipping my mind right now, but those are the major standouts. It's a good platform, and then it's also good to catch up on just some older DS releases like Rhythm Heaven. So yeah, it's good. It's a good system.
Yeah, I don't know. I there's a lot of games on handhelds that I really want to play and can't because they're on handhelds. But I would never play video games in a capacity where I'm out and about, where I need a handheld to play them.
Yeah.
So I never feel like the purchase is worth it, and most of the good games, most of the games on handhelds I don't want to say most, but a lot of handheld games are ported to PC in some way, or at least emulated, or the other way around. Actually, most like Vita games are PC ports, or ports from PC rather. But especially after their announcements last weekend, where like most of their Vita announcements I think were PC indie ports, which is fine. But yeah, I don't know if I could just justify a purchase when I'm never going to go outside with a handheld video game console. So yeah, let's yes, I think Chivalry deserves more recognition, but I don't think it's a fantastic game, but I love that game. Anyway, let's wrap it up because this could go on forever. I don't know. Any closing comments? Are we gonna do this next week?
I don't know. I think it went well. It might be a good idea.
Yeah, I don't know. I would say let's not get people's hopes up. We're not necessarily going to do this every week, but
Mhm.
I'd say we'll do it when we can or when we
Yeah.
feel like it because I think it's fun. We had a lot of viewers. We had a lot of people interacting, and so yeah, fun
Yeah.
stuff.
This is good.
We'll do it again sometime at least. Maybe next week even. We'll see. But for now, see you later. This has been Push to Shout episode 8. Tune in next week. Bye.
See ya.